So you might be asking yourself, who is this girl and why is she giving me advice? Well, my new friend, let me take a moment and introduce myself to you. I, like so many of us, had a really difficult, challenging childhood. The type of childhood that left me wondering if I was lovable, if I was good enough, what will my life be like? How will I be in relationships? Will I recognize love? How will I be as a mom? How will I treat myself when I'm older? What kind of relationships will I allow into my life as I grow? I always looked at life on a deeper level. I always felt a little bit different. And I also really found it to be soul level important for me to make sure that the people around me felt loved and that they mattered and that they were included. And eventually one day I realized that I needed to include myself in those values. So I've been on this journey where I've been collecting inspiration through ideas and through material that I've learned and through experiences that I've had and through every person that I've ever worked with on my journey or every friend who shared their story with me. And I realized that there's a part of me that's an educator that wants to share this information, that wants to share my experience and my knowledge that I've obtained throughout my life and spending my life just studying relationships and practicing the skills and tweaking them to make them even work for me even better. And on my journey, I went from being somebody who didn't know if I was lovable, if I could ever really be loved, if I was enough. I was an extreme people pleaser. I was codependent. And now, in my late 30s, I am an empowered woman. I am assertive. I do not settle for relationships that are good enough. They need to be incredible to stay in my life. I have broken the cycle, and I have an incredible marriage. And I have a son that I absolutely adore and feel beyond grateful that I get to be his mom. So I wanted to create this podcast for you, dear listener, because maybe some of the things that I've experienced or I've learned on my journey is something that you can apply to yours, or you can tweak it and make it your own to fit your journey so that you can allow yourself and give space for yourself to grow and become who you've always wanted to be, who you're meant to be on that soul level. So not only do I have my own life experiences, I have also spent my life working in the behavioral health field, in the mental health field, and I've also made sure that I have the credentials and the education to fully understand, and I continue to take trainings every year to make sure that I am up to date and that I am continuing to learn and practice the skills that are really truly going to help me create the best relationships that I possibly can have in my life, including and especially the relationship with myself. Through my journey, I learned that the most important relationship I'll ever have is the relationship with me. And I need to start there. And then it just ripples out and influences every other relationship that I have. So I do have a bachelor's in health and human development, a master's in marriage and family therapy. I also have an associate's degree as a wellness practitioner, which means that I also am a certified hypnotist. I'm a certified family life educator. I've studied holistic nutrition and also life coaching. So I've really spent my time studying this area so that I can tie in the research-based skills with the experiences that life has given me as well, so that I can deliver you experts and resources and awesome conversation that'll hopefully give you some things to think about and maybe shift your perspective or try out for yourself and see what you like and throw away what you don't. And anyway, I'm just so honored that you're here to share a piece of your journey with me. And again, I hope that part of my journey can positively influence yours. Welcome to the Beautifully Changed podcast. I'm Steph Hamas, and I'm delighted you're here. Now, let's make your relationships awesome. Hey, awesome sauce. Guess who is joining me again today for this episode? That's right. Or maybe you were completely wrong, but it is Nancy Richardson Fischer. She is an author and just an incredible human. I love talking with her because she's so insightful, so deep, so loving, so kind, and she's so creative, and I love her stories. She is the author of many books, but I'll share a couple of them with you. Nancy is a published author with children's, teen, and adult titles to her credit. So she's the author of When Elephants Fly, The Speed of Falling Objects, The Golden Globe, Lyric's World and Promises, Feel No Fear, The Power, Passion, and Politics of a Life in Gymnastics, Monica from Fear to Victory, and more. You guys, I just love Nancy. And she lives in the Pacific Northwest. And when she's not writing, she's hanging out with her husband and her dog. She loves kiteboarding and biking. And if you check out her Instagram, you will see so many pictures of her dog Boone. And it is so cute. And she always is posting like her writing inspirations. And I hope you love this interview, this conversation, and that it brightens up your day a little bit. It's a feel-good episode. Conversations with Nancy will always deliver some feel-good vibes because that's just how she rolls. So go ahead and grab your tea or enjoy your commute to work or wherever it is you're going on this lovely moment as you're tuning in, and let's go ahead and enjoy my conversation with Nancy. Nancy, welcome back. I'm so excited to talk to you today, but this time we're going to be talking about the speed of falling objects.
Well, thank you for having me again. I loved our last interview, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so which reminds me, last time when we were talking about When Elephants Fly, you had just gotten hit by a car, which in itself is wild. So are you fully recovered from that?
Yes, I am. I was riding my bicycle in Australia and the car didn't actually hit me. He was trying to pass another car on a curb and he veered at me, which forced me off the road, which made it so I went over my handlebars and broke my pelvis. So 2 months to the day I was back on my bike and I'm in great shape now. So thanks for asking.
I love that. Oh, so this happened while you were on vacation?
Yes, and I had to stay there because I couldn't fly. Which you'd think staying in a house in Australia would be nice, but when all of a sudden you can't leave the house and the house is 3 stories high and I couldn't leave one little section because I couldn't go up and down the stairs was kind of a bummer.
Yeah, when you put it like that,
yeah,
it's like you had your own quarantine before.
Yes, before the quarantine, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm curious then, when you were stuck there, for the 2 months, and I'm saying stuck, I know some people are like, don't use the word stuck, but to me it's
I was stuck. Yes.
Yeah. Was the creative process of like writing, do you feel like that helped you recover so quickly?
It definitely gave me a focus, but I'd say for a month or so, I really didn't do any writing because I couldn't get comfortable. I would say that COVID has actually been remarkably, surprisingly great for my creative process. I've written 2 books during this last year, and one completed quite quickly once the lockdown happened because there was nothing else to really do. So because it was kind of quiet in my mind because I wasn't getting any external stimulus. And so I just focused on writing and thinking about stories and characters. And in a way, it really helped me. I mean, writers in general are kind of locked down. We're sitting at our computer for long periods of time during the day. So that didn't really change. It's just that because I couldn't leave and distract myself as much, I got so much more done.
That's amazing. That's a really good point. So you just took that time and just dove into your creative process and just let it flow.
I did.
That's awesome. And can you share when those books are going to come out or what the titles are going to be, or is it still in the process of
Well, it's still in the process, and no title that I ever come up with is the title of any book I've ever written. Every single title has been changed. So I'm clearly terrible at choosing titles. But those books are both with my agent. So I'm hoping that at least one will go out on submission really soon. And whether she'll do two at the same time or not, I have no idea. But they're both adult novels. So it's a departure from writing young adult. Which has been really exciting and challenging as well. It's nice to switch things up sometimes and force yourself to write in a different way, and keep things really fresh. So I'm excited to kind of have my adult debut, hopefully, if, fingers crossed, my novels sell.
That's amazing. So what did you notice as you transitioned from young adult to adult? Did you have to was that scary for you at first? Did you have to change? I don't know. Did you decide to drink a different kind of tea, or what did you do differently in your creative process to step into that different genre?
Well, I think with young adult, you have to keep in mind a lot of different things. You have to keep in mind really being fairly politically correct in what you're writing, and you have a sense of responsibility toward your readers to present things in certain ways. Whereas with adult, we're all adults. We can choose to read, not read, what influences us, what doesn't influence us. And so even though in the adult novel world, there's still a lot of controversy, is the best way to say it, with authors and own voices and different things like that. I found it very freeing to just put whatever I wanted to put out there. I didn't worry about swearing. I didn't worry about including more graphic or detailed sexual encounters, things that were true to my characters, but I couldn't necessarily do that in a young adult novel, which is understandable.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So in a way, it kind of let you just flow into not editing yourself, and then you could go back and edit yourself even more. Because last time we talked and you said you have no problem editing yourself. You can cut out what you need to and you save it for later if you want. But I
don't. I have no problem editing myself or being edited. I think it's part of the process and it makes everything you do better. So
I love that, because I think at first I would take it personal. I would be like,
well, you do at first, but then you realize, I started out by writing sport autobiographies. And so those were not my stories. And so you naturally get edited by the athletes that you're writing, their story with them. And so I never took that personally. And then when it becomes your own story, you tend to want to take it more personally. But again, every time you have a great editor and you follow direction, you look at what you've written and think, this is so much better. So you've got to trust your editor and your editing process.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. Okay, so let's talk about the speed of falling objects. And first, I want to thank you for writing a book like this, especially for young adults, because the main character, Danny, right? She is somebody who's courageous, and you watch her grow in, throughout the book in her relationships. And I think even though there's a lot of tragedy within the book, there's also a lot of inspiration and hope and growth. And I think back to when I was a teenager, and I don't remember, or a young adult, I don't remember reading books with a character that a main female character that was just so strong and kind and smart and creative. So thank you.
Well, thanks for saying that. That makes me so happy. I really wanted, so for anyone who's listening who doesn't know who Danny is or hasn't read the story yet, she's this timid young woman who lost one of her eyes in a childhood accident and defines herself as defective and inferior based on the way other kids treat her, the teasing she gets, her parents' divorce, her father's abandonment, her mother's bitterness. And when her dad's a famous TV survivalist named Cougar, and when she's given the opportunity to be part of an episode of his show, she just jumps at the chance to prove that she's worthy of her dad's love. and also the show is being filmed with this super hot movie idol Gus, and so that's kind of the cherry on top of the situation. But the plane crashes and she's forced to face everything that terrifies her and find her unique strengths in order to survive and potentially save some of the people that she loves. And I too, as a kid, was always looking for characters who transcended their situations and defined themselves, and didn't really find those books. I found them with male characters. I remember reading The Outsiders and thinking, oh my gosh, this is such an evolution for these characters, and look what's happened to them. But I didn't find it as, I'm sure there were books, but I didn't find it as much, other than Judy Blume books, with female characters. And those, they were always dealing with kind of emotional issues and situations. And so I really was hoping that I could find a character who defined herself, and that readers would look at that and say, hey, maybe I can be the hero of my own life story. Maybe I can define myself. Maybe the labels that have been put upon me aren't really who I am. And that takes a lot of courage. It's really hard as a kid to do. So my hope is that someone will read it and say, wait a second, I'm not these things, I'm these other things, and I'm going to act accordingly.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think everything you said is definitely displayed within the book so well. Like as you're reading well, at least when I was reading the book, I really felt like I was like in the jungle with them and looking out for spiders and like the creepy crawly things, right? And that is such a solid point, because Danny's character, you do see at the beginning of the book, right, where her best friend Trix is trying to like tell her, right, like you can do this, you're great, you know, but she doesn't want to believe it until she believes it herself.
Right.
And it is such a story of like family dysfunction and like abandonment. Like even when you talk about the death of her parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it just makes sense as you read the book and as the story kind of unfolds, like the psychology behind the behavior of even Cougar and of Danny, you know, and of Samantha. So it's so well written, and it's just like uncovers slowly. And then it's like, as you get to the end, it's, even though again, like I said, there's so much tragedy in the book,
right,
like,
right.
Oh, this is sad, you know, it still ends with like hope and growth. And I love how you said it shows that you can, you know, face your fears and transform through them and really get to own yourself. And I love that you have someone so young doing this, like a 17-year-old, because as you said, it's hard to do as a teenager, but it's hard to do as an adult. Like I know so many adults who are still working on, you know, moving through a lot of their stuff. I kind of think it's like a lifetime journey, but you know.
Right. It is. It's a lifetime journey. And I think your core beliefs get set, I think, in stone when you're very, very young. And then as an adult, if you take the time to look at those core beliefs, you can decide, I believe you don't really change your core beliefs. You are who you are at a certain point, but you get to choose how you behave. So you may have a core belief that you're a scaredy cat, but you can choose to take a rock climbing class. You can choose to do these things, and they will convince you over time that while that core belief will never go away, you're not really that person. And then you can leave the core belief alone and not have any dissonance over it, but live the life you want to live without letting those beliefs guide you. So if Danny, for example, had continued to believe that she was defective and inferior, that would have affected her whole adult life. I imagine her at 40 being fairly unhappy, maybe in an unhappy marriage with, you know, an unkind husband, maybe choosing not to have children because she didn't want to pass those things on in any way. But instead, she gets this gift of getting to see herself and discover who she really is early in life. And most of us aren't going to be in a plane crash in the Amazon and have to survive, thankfully. But there are little situations throughout our entire young lives where we get to make those choices if we're super aware.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And you know, when you talk about the plane crash too, like that scene where they crash and then she, you know, comes out, and it's like this, like realizing that her dad left her again, right? But then she's still willing. Like, what I think is so cool is you read Danny's story. Like, all of the characters are so fantastic. But I'm just focusing on Danny because she's like the main one, right? And it just reminds you of what you can do, like what you can push yourself through when you're trying to impress somebody. Yes. So even though her dad isn't like, he's not going to win an award for being like the best dad, right? She still wants his love and affection and approval. And so, but as she's trying to impress him, it's like she's discovering how strong she is herself.
Yes. And seeing him for the first time for who he truly is. And I think we all have that in our lives where we see who our parents are truly for the first time. And then we have to decide whether we forgive them for their failings. I don't think we ever get over wanting to please our parents. It doesn't matter who they were, how they treated us. It's just something that's so ingrained in you, wanting to make them proud. But it's really hard when you realize that they're just as fallible as anyone else. And then you have to discover whether you're a kind person, whether you can forgive them for those failings. And that's another part of Danny's journey in the story is having to separate herself and make that decision, which is a very adult decision to make.
Very true. I like how you say that too. Like, you have to decide if you're going to forgive them and kind of lead with that kindness, because as you realize Cougar isn't amazing as a dad, you're also realizing, you know, a little bit of why he's like that, you know? Right. And so it's not like he wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to be a terrible dad.
Right.
You know, he's also living his life trying to fulfill that emptiness within himself and that need to be loved and important. And at the very beginning, when you even talk about, like you mentioned, which might be missed, that, you know, he lost his parents at 11, but there was no insurance, right? So, you know, which made it so he probably, I mean, had a really tough go at it. Like, his teenage years growing up was really hard. And so it just kind of, not that it excuses the behavior, but it helps you understand it.
Exactly. And when you can understand it, you can come from a place of sympathy, if not empathy.
Yeah, for sure. I thought that was so great. So, okay, when it comes to like killing off characters versus having it be like all coming together and just like this happy, glorious, everyone makes up and is so good. What's the process that you go through as you decide, you know, okay, I'm going to kill off these characters and I'm going to let these characters live, and there's going to be sadness, but there's going to be hope? Like, how do you go down that journey yourself?
I think that the story informs me who is going to have to go. And sometimes I'm really disappointed or sad to lose specific characters. I never start at the beginning. I know certain things. I'm not going to spoil. I knew the ending of this story. I knew what had to happen. But as far as some of the other characters in the story, I let the story inform me. So I think if you create three-dimensional characters and really take time to understand, for in this story, Danny, and what she needs out of this journey, then when it comes to killing off characters, it becomes really clear what she needs at each point in order to grow. And so it's never an arbitrary decision. It's a decision that comes from understanding what my character needs in the moment. So, but I am a little sad to do it, and I try and do it really quickly because I have this bizarre belief that their characters are alive in some way, and that if I kill them too slowly, or if I take 3 weeks to kill them, that I'm making them suffer. So when I decide to kill off a character, I try in one day to get down their death so that they don't have to suffer for too long. I get it over for them.
Like that, the compassion of the character.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I can kind of see that then throughout the story. That definitely is what's going on.
Yeah, they always serve a purpose, and there's nothing arbitrary about killing off a character. You've taken the time to create this character. You have to love that character in some way. Even if a character isn't the best person, I find them redeemable. And some of the comments from readers after they read the story were that Cougar was such a jerk. And, but I never saw Cougar as such a jerk. I just saw him as the product of his circumstances, and I had compassion for him. So yeah, I only kill off characters when absolutely necessary for my main character's growth.
That makes sense. Ooh, for your main character's growth. I like it. That's good. I've got like so many questions, but I'm also trying not to spoil the story
Right.
for people who haven't read it. But okay, so as you talk about like reading what writers have, reading what the readers have read.
Yes.
About the reviews, is there a review that kind of sticks out to you as one that you were like, yes, that's what I was going for. I'm so glad they got that.
Any reader who relates to Danny and says something about taking control of their own narrative, that makes me the happiest. Because I write these young adult stories about young women who are facing really tough circumstances and even death, and in some way overcoming, surviving, thriving, because I want readers to relate and take those lessons to heart. So any reader who relates to the main character and thinks I'm going to be braver, stronger, forge my own path makes me really happy.
I love that. Yeah, I could see that, because that's important to know. And then you know that, hey, this thing that you wrote really spoke to people and inspired them in their own life, and let them know they're not alone. Even though it's like a fictional story, it's still nice to know like there's a lot of realness within the story too.
Right.
You know?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So even Danny, she's already inspiring enough without only having one eye, right?
Right.
So the fact that you add that in just makes the story even more compelling, because she's in the jungle and all the creepy crawlies, like, and when they have to crawl through the swamp. Oh,
I know. You know, a funny thing is that I hate bugs, any kind of bug. I hate tiny spiders. I run from just the tiniest spider. So doing the research for this novel, you know, there's, I think, 3,600 kinds of spiders in the Amazon, and there's almost 20 venomous snakes and millions of insects, some of which don't even have names. Really was hard for me. And I can look at pictures of snakes, but I actually can't even look at a picture of a spider. So I had to hold a piece of paper over the picture of whatever spider I was researching while I read about the spider, because I just couldn't handle seeing the actual spider. And that never changed. And something that my publisher wanted me to do for PR for this book was go to the zoo and do an interview where I put a spider on my hand and I faced my fears, and I set it up, and then I canceled because I couldn't do it. I just really couldn't do it. I'm way too afraid of, I don't even like plastic spiders. So I couldn't handle it.
I totally get it, because when I got the book with like the candy spider,
the gummy spider, I know. And I never even ate one of those. And I love gummy bears, but they're these huge gummy tarantulas that are as big as the size of your palm, which is how big they really are. And I can't even eat that. Yeah.
Got you. That's impressive that you wrote a book all around it too, because it's so detailed. And yeah, I'm the same. I used to be, if there was a spider in the room, I was like, not going into that room until that spider is not in there anymore.
No, and I try and we've spent some time in Australia, and they have very big spiders. And they have this thing called, I think it's called a hunter spider, which is non-venomous. And everyone I met there said, oh, have you seen your first hunter spider? Because they're so big and gross and ugly looking, but they don't bite. And they told stories about having one in their car while they were driving and how terrifying it was. And I have not seen one. And it's because I think anytime I see a little movement, I try and blur my eyes, because I know I can't handle actually seeing the spider. So I'm not sure I would have done as well as Danny did in the Amazon, because it would have been really hard for me.
I think the same thing. I'm like, I would have been a goner.
Out of there, yes.
There's no way. Not even just the spiders, but like the snakes and like
the scorpions, everything.
Animals. Yeah, I was like, this is so good. Okay, so what, Nancy, writing a book like this, what does it inspire you to do in your own life? So even though you couldn't go to the zoo to hold the spider in your hand, what has it inspired you to do that you didn't think maybe you would do?
Trying to think. I really try and face most of my fears and live in the moment as much as possible. It did not inspire me to face my fear of spiders, snakes, scorpions. That did not inspire me. I would say just to live in the moment. Everything that I write, I try and be inspired to live in the moment, because I think it's the hardest thing in the world to do. So to live in the moment, to have a bit more compassion for people because you don't know their backstory. I remember when I was writing When Elephants Fly, and Lily, the main character, has this family history of mental health conditions. And you see her as this young woman, and you think of all the promise that she has. And that story inspired me to see people, sometimes you walk down the street, if you live in an area with a ton of homeless people, it inspired me to realize that those homeless people were just, a lot of them like Lily, there's a huge percentage of homeless people that have mental health conditions. And they were once children with a ton of promise and dreams and hopes. And so that book inspired me to look at people differently and realize I didn't know their backstory, and to see people that sometimes would scare me walking down the street, who were yelling or coming too close to me, as once being a child with a ton of promise and being in an unfortunate situation where they had no family or programs that could support them. So in the same way I look at, Danny, and it inspires me to have compassion for people whose backstories I know nothing about, who are doing the best they can given the circumstances that they came from.
That is so much truth in there. And I think when you are able to do that, it takes away that bitterness that you can feel, right? That
or
expectations, that fear, that also just the anger. And once you kind of release some of that anger or that judgment on other people, even if it's not anger that you feel, but you watch, right? Like Cougar, like how you say you didn't see him as like a jerk. Because you knew his story, right?
Exactly.
You knew it is, but as you're reading and you're unfolding, it's like, I think a lot of people too, if their dad left, they probably are like, oh, I can relate to that, but it's also like, even though there's that pain there, you still, like you said, you'll have that compassion for your parents and you still want them to.
And everybody has a backstory that shapes them.
It makes me think about when you're talking about kindness and compassion and how everyone has their own story. So back in high school, I remember thinking, I think early teenage years, I was in that state where it was like, why is anybody else being grumpy? Like, I know their life is not the same as my life. Like I'm going through way more challenges than they are. And why are they acting like that? Why are they being cruel? Why are they, having these pity parties? Or why are they not going after things? Why don't they believe in themselves? They have the support. They have this, they have that, right?
Right.
And then I heard this quote that was, be kind, for everyone's fighting their own battle, right? Or I think it actually said like everyone's fighting a harder battle. And I was like, oh yeah, everyone does think their battle's harder,
Exactly.
And so when I was about 16, I read that and it totally changed my view. And I was like, you know what? Somebody who the worst thing that happened to them is their dad didn't go to their baseball game. That feels just as terrible to them. If that's the worst thing that's ever happened, that's deep pain for them, right?
Exactly.
And so we don't have to have the same experiences in order to understand what pain feels like. So
that's true.
Yeah, so then it totally changed my life, and that's my perspective. And I was like, okay, everyone has the right to feel.
That's awesome that you realize that at such a young age too. That, because it's really hard as a kid to not just see the world from your lens, right? It's really hard to realize that sometimes I look at a big building filled with people sitting at their desks in an office, like not COVID times, but normal times. And I think those thousands of people are all thinking their own thoughts, living their own lives. They're having these singular experiences. All these people, you think it's all about you and your experiences are what matters. And all those people are having all these other experiences in the world. And you're just one little grain of sand in the whole world. It's overwhelming when you think about it. If you turn the volume up on people's inner thoughts, the cacophony of would be overwhelming. And every single person has all these things that matter to them the most, all these people that matter to them the most, all these goals and dreams that matter to them the most. And taking yourself out of that singular view and seeing that everyone feels that is mind bending to me.
Yeah, that is such a great point too. Like when you really break it down like that and think about it, because people are all in their mind having their own experiences. And then yet there's also such beauty in that, because even though we're all having our own experiences, our own thoughts, there's still such deep kindness and compassion that really does flow through people. And you know what's also interesting when you think about that too? So when it comes to like judgment and compassion and stuff, just because I think that this behavior is kind, or that this is compassion, and this person's doing something else that they think is kind, and they think my thing is enabling or not kind, or you know what I mean? Like,
right.
Whatever, they're still doing something that they think is kind. Like even if they're giving to a charity that I'm like, why would you ever give to that charity?
Exactly.
They're still being like, because I believe in this is doing good. Me giving money to this charity is doing the most good that I could do. So
right.
I think you're right that we're all showing up in a way where we think that we are doing our best, and we are giving and loving and being compassionate in our own ways.
Exactly. And not putting any judgment on that.
I love that. So there's this sentence in here that Danny is saying, right, where she says, just the one sentence that I think is just so important. She goes, "That's what I've been trying to do with you, make you what I need. But that can never work." Truth, right? Because she says truth.
Right.
The things.
Right.
And I thought that is such, if people are reading this book and they get like these little, even if it's just like seeds planted into their subconscious while they're reading it, that is such a good one, because it really is, when we're trying to make someone what I need, we'll always end up feeling disappointed because we're not honoring the relationship that is there and what is already good in that relationship.
And just who someone is. No, you can't change people. I think young women in particular, we try and save people and make people who we into a better form, and you just can't do that. People are who they are, whether it's your parent, whether it's a boyfriend or your husband. You have to be happy with who that person is in your life, because they're never going to be the version that you think would be better or work better for you.
Yeah, that's so true. And young women do that a lot. I remember in my early 20s hearing friends be like, "Oh, well, as soon as we get married, he'll."
Right.
And I was like, if you wouldn't marry him right now today, are you sure you want to marry him hoping he's all of a sudden going to change into the version of who you want him to be? That is such a good point, because it is really, and also, as I was thinking as you were saying this, it's like, if I want somebody to change for me and I'm not accepting them for who they are, then we're really not a good fit.
Exactly.
And then they think they need to be this certain way. So it's going to be so much harder for them to find their actual fit, because they're pretending to be someone they're not.
That's exactly the truth. Someone once told me when I was dating in my 20s that men were like couches. And when you buy a couch, it's a love seat or it's a 4-cushion couch. The structure of the couch remains the same. You can reupholster the couch and it can look different, but the structure, the couch, is still the same couch. So if you are dating someone or want to marry someone and you say, well, they'd be great if they just, or that, they're still going to be the same couch. And you can change little things. You can get some throw pillows, maybe make the corner of the couch more comfortable for you at times, but it's still the same couch. And so remembering that in friendships, in relationships, is something that's always stuck with me in life, because people are who they are. They're not going to drastically change, unless there's some drastic situation. If someone is an alcoholic and they decide to get help and go through whatever program helps them and they stop drinking, then they are an alcoholic who has stopped drinking. But they're still an alcoholic, but they've committed in a major way to change their behavior, right? Mm-hmm. But people are who they are. Couches are what they are. So
that's a great metaphor.
Right.
I mean, you can really visualize that. And so they might, and I think there is some give and take in relationships, right? Like you you can watch a rom-com even if you don't like, they're not your
right
favorite.
if you like thrillers, right?
Yeah, you know, you can like give it
Course.
in that way, but it's like expecting someone to be an extrovert when they're actually an introvert, you know,
Right.
is just setting yourself up for disappointment. So it really is. I like that metaphor because I think it really will help people think about that. How funny. I've never heard that before, that one.
It really stuck with me because it's really true.
Yes, I love that.
So Cougar is who he is. He can do things that are selfless at times, but he, even though they appear selfless, Cougar still chooses to do things based on forwarding his persona, his image, you know, expanding his image, getting a movie deal. He's still going to choose to do those things. Now, some of those things might actually help other people, but Cougar is still going to be a guy who's driven by, you know, more self-involved pursuits.
Yeah. Yep. And I think also when you talk about the divorce of the parents, of Danny's parents, it's there's some shame there as well through Cougar, right? And I think that's where, I mean, I always think that shame is one of the hardest emotions to heal through and to work through, because it's really thinking that you aren't enough or you are bad, versus that guilt, right, of thinking, oh, I did something wrong. It's like, I am wrong. And so you really have to, if you develop that belief when you were younger that you are bad, you are wrong, it takes a lot of work to move through that. And I do think you show with Cougar definitely moments of that tender side, that gentle side, the dad that Danny needed and wanted, right?
Yeah, no, there are moments where Cougar can be those things, but he is always going to be driven to fill that empty space inside him that can never be filled.
Exactly. Oh, that gives me the goosebumps, because it's so much. And that's what I love about your writing, is that it's so, there's like so emotional, but it's also so well done. It's so detailed. Like you really feel like you're in the story and that you really know these characters. And so
good.
That's why as you go through it, it's like I'll feel all the emotions. Like when certain characters die, I'm like, what? Why? I wanted to know more about them. Like what was happening here? Or, you know, I'm also just like one of those like happy-go-lucky people with my like movies. Like I love the movies where you don't necessarily know the ending to the story. It like kind of leaves you guessing, because then I'm like, oh, then I just make it end like perfectly happy.
Right, happily ever after. And I am drawn to different versions of happily ever after within the parameters of life isn't all happily ever after, but you make your best version of happily ever after.
Yeah, and you can see that with your books. And I think that's why they end with like feeling this hope, this inspiredness, you know? And it's like, this feels really cool. I would love to actually talk to someone who's like 16 or 17 who read this book and see how it really influenced them. Because as adult women, you know, I just turned 39. So I think of reading this book and I can definitely see all the layers and the healing and the growth. But I'm wondering, if I was 17 and read this book, what would have it encouraged me to do that maybe I wasn't doing?
Right. And it's really fun when I talk to groups of kids, to classes, and ask those questions and see what inspired them or what they take away. Because it's not necessarily what we would take away as adult women, you know, having had so many more experiences in life. So I have a group of kids from a library who just read the book, who I'm going to speak with in a couple weeks, and I'll ask them that, and I'll send you a note and see what they say, because it's really fun to see what lands and what doesn't.
Yes. Yeah. Please do share with me.
Yes, I will, for sure.
Definitely want to know that. I think it's just so great. Okay, now I'm just curious. So you already mentioned that you have 2 books coming out. Is there any other projects that you're working on, or any other like fun things you're doing with your writing or just in life in general?
Well, I think a really fun thing, I reread When Elephants Fly for an interview, because what happens is you write these books and you're so immersed, but you have to let them go and move on to the next one. So a lot of times I don't even remember half the characters' names or really specific incidents that happened. And I started imagining not writing a book in Lily's voice, the main character of When Elephants Fly, because when that story ends, you have to decide, does she have a mental health condition? Is she going to still end up with Otis, the young man who helped her steal Swift Jones, the elephant, from the circus and bring the elephant to a sanctuary to potentially save Swifty's life, but you don't know if Swifty actually survives. And I thought, I'd like to write an adult novel from a minor character's perspective in that story with a whole new story, but that you get to go back and cross over with Lily and Otis and Swifty and see what happened in their lives. So the idea is to have a couple different main characters with a different journey entirely, but whose journey is impacted by the story of Lily and Swifty, and they go in search of finding the answers to what happened.
I love that. That would be so amazing.
Good.
Never think about any like follow-ups of this.
Yeah.
Whatever. That would be so good, because you're right. At the end of When Elephants Fly, I was like, okay, Swifty's fine. Swifty's healthy.
Right. You made up the story, and you probably, you know, she has a hallucination, and you don't know whether that is real, not real, brought on by stress, or whether she's exhibiting signs of schizophrenia. And so I'm sure you kind of wrapped it up as she's tired, maybe, right? And maybe that wasn't happening. And I never, in my mind, I know the answer to that question, but I let readers decide how they want things to play out. But now I'd like to go back, because the thing about writing young adult is your readers grow up. And so they're looking for that. There are some adults who just read YA, which is totally understandable. YA books are so fresh and exciting and full of hope, and depict a time in life that we all want to go back and remember. And but now those readers are growing up and are adults, and I'd like to give them something deeper and delve into different issues that I can kind of address as an adult novel that I couldn't as a young adult novel. So that's the one I'm kind of conjuring right now and thinking about, as these two other books are, you know, with my agent and moving in that process. So hopefully people will want to know.
Yeah, I think so. I know I definitely would, and I can't be alone in that. And at the end, though, I did think, I was like, oh no, she gave her schizophrenia. But now that you say she could have been tired, I'm like,
yeah, she must have been tired. Right. Right. That's funny.
A part of me was like so sad. I was like, oh no. Because like you talk about how it's like they have so much potential. People have so much potential. Yes. And knowing how debilitating something can be. I love that idea. I hope you do that.
Oh, good.
That would be fun. So fun to read. Because it's ended so good. I remember thinking like, what? This is the ending. I want to know more. Like, tell me more. So
right.
I love that. Okay. So I know you dedicated this book to your husband.
Yes.
Yes. And so I'm curious, what is one of your favorite dates that you and Henry go on? Henry's your husband, right?
Yes.
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 So what is one of your favorite dates that you and Henry go do? And like, also, did it change now that COVID-19 is going on?
It hasn't changed. We're lucky enough to live in Oregon, in a small town where we still had access to the outdoors. So Henry and I, there's a saying in our little town, couples that play together stay together. And we play together, and that was kind of the foundation of our relationship when we were just friends, before we even started dating, is that we would windsurf together and bike ride and mountain bike together. So we never say this is a date day or this is date night, but we do all of our recreational sports mostly together because there's no one I'd rather be with playing. Last night I finished writing and Henry popped his head into my little writing shack and said, "It's windy on the river." And I jumped into the car, and he had made a little wooden rowing dinghy to get us to an island where the wind is a bit better because we're kite surfers. We rowed over to the island. He launched my kite, and then he launched his kite. and the sun was setting and we were out on the river and a wind was blowing, there were huge waves, and we were just kite surfing together. Those moments I feel such gratitude for, because we're living in the moment. When you kite surf, there's big wind, there's waves, you're flying a kite that can be really dangerous if it gets out of control. You have these long lines that attach from your body to the kite, which is 25, 30 feet above your head. And so you have to be in the moment, and you're on a wave together, and it's just this beautiful melding of nature and your relationship. So that's what we do no matter what. And even in COVID times, we could get out and hike in the woods with our dog. I love doing things where we're with our dog as well. So yeah, those are our quote unquote dates.
I love that. And it's so true. Like, you don't necessarily have to declare it as a date. It's just spending time together. And I love that too. Couples that play together, stay together. That's so true. Play is so important. You got to have fun and be like, whether it's being goofy and silly or going out and exploring together, that's so important. I'm sure you've noticed that because you do that, you feel like real friends and lovers, right? It's like this whole mix of everything. There's the romance, but then there's also the friendship and the just ability to just be yourself and go enjoy the world together. That's
exactly.
Awesome.
That's exactly it.
And you bring Boone, right? Boone's your dog, and you bring...
Yes, he doesn't come kite surfing, but he comes on every hike, and we swim with him in the river. And it's strange having an older dog. I post a little bit about this on Instagram, and he's not an easy dog. But as he gets older, everything's just a little more bittersweet, I think with, life turns on a dime, right? As human beings, we tend to not realize that till later in life, when some of our friends start getting sick and you realize that, I always say we're just bags of juice and bone, which sounds really gross, but like, we're just these, living creatures, and our hold on life is tenuous, even though we don't realize it. And the younger you are, the less you realize it. So when you have a dog and you watch a dog get older and you realize that you're going to see that dog from life to passing, every moment becomes sweeter.
Yeah, that is so true. Dogs really do teach us so much. And I love all your pictures of Boone on Instagram. And
oh, good. My friends tell me I seem like a crazy dog lady, but
well, maybe I'm another crazy dog lady. I love them.
I just love posting pictures of him. He's infinitely more interesting than seeing pictures of me.
Well, and he's so cute, and I love how he's living the dream life.
He is. He's got the life. It's ridiculous. The only thing he doesn't get to do is go in our bed. Okay. He take it over completely. So
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, big dogs seem to even just like expand even more.
Exactly. He's 10 times the size.
Full bed. So big dogs, yes.
Yeah, he would kick us out.
And so we spoke about Instagram, so you're definitely on there. Where can people connect with you, Nancy, if they want to find you, if they want to follow you, connect with you, all that good stuff?
Just go to nancyrichardsonfisher.com. That's my author website, and all the contact information is there. You can find me Nan Fisher Author on Instagram, Nan Fisher Author at Twitter, and say hello.
Do you like Twitter?
Not really.
Okay.
It's not my favorite. I'm on there. I have a bit of a presence on there, but not a huge one. I feel like the Bookstagram community and the community in general on Instagram is based on kindness from what I've seen. And Twitter, there seem to be some mean people on there. Mean people scare me. I'm a big fan of kindness. So I'm really careful on Twitter. And I prefer to interact with people on Instagram if I have a choice.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. Yeah. I just think as like a writer, Twitter would be so easy because it's like,
It is, but that can get you into trouble. And I feel like there's always people waiting to just pounce on any wrong word. So I feel like you have to be really careful. And I feel like people on Instagram are really, it feels much more embracing as a community when you're an author.
Yeah, very supportive, and they want to celebrate you and your work because they want more of your work. They want you to keep.
Well, and I want to celebrate other authors and writers and artists and people doing all the great work like you're doing. So I find it's easier for me to do on Instagram.
I love that. So speaking of, I saw on your Instagram this morning, and I know this is going to be coming out later because it's happening tonight and the podcast is going to come out later, but you're interviewing another author.
Oh no, that's not me.
Oh,
I just posted. I posted Misa Segura. She's interviewing another author, and she's an author who I just love so much and support everything that she does. And she's been really supportive and written blurb for The Speed of Falling Objects. She wrote a blurb for, and I just try every author that I love. I repost what they're doing because I just know that I'd love it.
I love it. You're so supportive. Okay, so I misread it. I thought it was you.
No worries. I just reposted. Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. That sounds cool. I love it. I love how supportive you are to everyone else in the writing community. That's got to be something that's very huge to do, like, and inclusive. It's like you're inviting somebody in and you're like saying, I'm here, I'm supporting you. I understand the journey. You're not going to go through this alone. You're going to have a cheering squad, you know?
Exactly. And I think we all try and do that for each other. There's so many authors who've done that for me. And so you just try and pass it on, right?
Yeah. And I think you're the type of person who would do it even if somebody else wasn't doing it for you. You would be
definitely
like, this is just what we do. This is what I do. This is
exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay. Last question, Nancy. What is a piece of advice that you try to live your life by?
Be kind. That's it. I treat people how I want to be treated. I do that in my marriage. I do that in my friendships. I do that with my dog. You know, I treat every living being how I want to be treated. And that's not to say that sometimes my ego doesn't get involved and that I don't fail, but I always try and come back to be kind.
That's so important, to be kind. And you even have like that kindness and talk about kindness throughout the book. Yes. Of The Speed of Falling Objects. Like, it's within there quite a bit. And I think that's really important because oftentimes we get told that if we're kind, it's a weakness. And you're like also bringing this into the book of young adults where it's reminding them that kindness is actually a strength. It's a gift. It's a really solid, great thing that it was within you, and to let it come out and be alive in you.
And it doesn't take anything away from you to be kind. There's no deficit in you from being kind to a ton of people. All it does is just give you all these little gifts in different ways. When you're kind, you pass that on and other people pass that on. So yeah, just be kind, everyone.
I love that. And it ties into when we're talking about expectations, right? So this was something, as you say this was such a lesson I learned in my 30s, that I also believe that you treat people how you want to be treated. What I had to learn was that doesn't mean people are going to treat me how I want to be treated. Like, people are still going to show up in the world in the way that they show up in the world. And I don't have any control over that. However, I treat people kind because that feels really good to me and that feels true to who I am. And so it doesn't mean that they're going to treat me the same way, but that also doesn't mean I have to stop being who I am.
That's a really great thing to have learned. And you shouldn't ever give kindness expecting it returned. It's for fun and for free, you know, right? It really is. And you can't, just like you can't be a great friend to someone and expect them to be a great friend back to you. You just stay true to yourself and you're that person. Friendships, relationships, they all come with expectations, but no one is going to mirror exactly what you give. And if you start measuring, I was kind, so they should be kind. I gave this, so I should be given this back. You're always going to be disappointed because people always feel like they're the ones who gave. You ask a partnership, who gives 100%? And one person will always say, like, I give 100, he gives this. Henry and I both say we each give 110%, you know, and it still sometimes doesn't feel like enough, but you do the most that you can do to be true to who you are. So yeah, kindness with no expectation of return.
Yeah. And that is a lesson to learn, and it's really something to practice. So okay, I know I said last question, but since we're talking,
no problem.
I'm like, how have you practiced that yourself? Because I know that was something that I used to think. I would say, well, I'm an excellent friend. Why are they being not an excellent friend back? And then it was like, I realized that maybe this is my strength in the friendship, is that I do this and they do that. And is that feel like a good enough friendship for me? Or not even just good enough, does that feel like a good friendship, knowing that this is my strength and that's their strength? Or does it feel unfulfilling and hurtful? And if it does, then maybe that's not the friendship to keep investing in. And so it was definitely a lesson to learn, is that we each have our strengths, and also each friend has like one friend I go to that's way more fun, and another friend is like really good for having supportive conversations. You know what I mean?
Right. Like no friend can be everything. I had this situation recently where I felt like I'd given a ton to a friendship and that I was a really solid, consistent friend to someone. And she kind of fell off the face of the earth. I really didn't hear from her. And part of me wanted to call her and say, hey, what happened? You're not being a good friend. Why aren't you being a good friend? I've done all these things. And then I realized that to consistently be the good friend I wanted to be, I had to respect the fact that whatever journey she's going on, whatever's going on in her life, that's where she is. But coming at a person and saying, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? I can actually be the friend that I know I am and want to be by leaving it alone and letting that person have their journey and not putting my expectations. So consistency wise, I'm just maintaining the person I want to be. And I think that's the most you can do in any friendship, is just keep staying the person or relationship that you want to be without an expectation that someone owes you something in return, if that makes sense.
It does. That's so well said. I love that, maintaining the person you want to be. And I think that means sometimes you're also going to have this like closeness and distance dance with friendships. And it kind of goes to what you said earlier, like if you don't know the backstory, maybe we don't know the whole backstories all the time.
Exactly. And you don't know how what you've said and done has affected someone else, because you don't see the world through their lens. So you just have to respect where people are in their life and continue to be the person you want to be throughout that all.
I love that. I love that takeaway, Nancy. Maintain the person you want to be regardless of what anybody else is doing. So right. I love that. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Being with me today. This was fantastic.
Well, thank you. And thanks for reading The Speed of Falling Objects and for reading my When Elephants Fly and wanting to talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, I love it. Like this is an honor for me. Like I'm so excited that you wanted to come on and talk with me about it.
Oh, of course. We have great conversations, and I love your perspective and all the things that you do. So it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. And make sure to share this episode with someone and leave a review. And remember, you're worthy of incredible love.